Forbes. Yes, another name for a journalist. A retired educator, a fisherman, at times a hunter, an organic farmer, which simply means he not only had a sense of humour, but he had a sense of humus as well. A family man through and through. In short, Sid Balhorn, a man of many parts. At times, for Sid, survival necessitated a certain versatility. His CV would make very interesting reading. Some have described him as Australia's Don Quixote. A man of strong opinions with ideas ahead of his time. And looking back over his 92 years, one can say on many occasions his has been the road less travelled. The passage of years has revealed a certain wisdom in what he wrote. Sadly, at the time, the bulk of the community were not listening. One can quite easily, fill a page or two with descriptions of this rather rough diamond who did his best to stir social consciousness, pricking the balloon of a self-righteous and complacent community. For this, he was ostracised. Anyone who tries to move public opinion faces a monumental task, and he knew that from first-hand experience. What was born into this gentleman from a very young age was a love of nature, natural beauty. The joy of growing things fed his spirit, as well as fruit and veggies and eggs. It provided food for his table and the tables of others. Family, today you have good reason to be proud of Sid, who will always be your link with the past. The past comprising pioneers whose shoulders we stand on, and we should never ever forget that. If you're looking for a cemetery that's loaded with history, this is where it's at. One of the early resting places here in the state of Victoria. And today we honour our history, and Sid's story is part of that history. And his is a colourful tapestry indeed, woven over 9 decades. And the reality is, when you live into your 10th decade, there are very few of your peers that are still around. You've outlived them. But Sid's is a tale that shouldn't be forgotten. Woven through those years is a love story, passion, and Sid himself, I learned the other day, is a hoarder of clippings. There's about a ton of them in filing cabinets and boxes stored away there down at Port Franklin. Cuttings from newspapers over many decades. Shanaz, yours has been a close and loving relationship and partnership. And today we honour your caring for Sid in his senior and sunset years, and his preference, and having been given a guided tour of their home at Port Franklin, I can understand why his choice was to see out his days there surrounded by the sights and sounds of home and nature, rather than to spend his time in a nursing home somewhere. And Shanaz, you made that possible for him. Sid's 4 children freely acknowledge their father's input into their lives. Marion, Stephen, Linda and Diana. And as well, a number of close friends who have chosen to be here today. Today, for our purposes, this is Gippsland Central. We come from far and near to do what needs to be done. We participate in a farewell to a maverick, a nonconformist, an adventurer, a man that you will always love and treasure. If he could leave you with something from himself, I'm sure it would be communicating to you the importance of thinking for yourself and not being a mere reflector of other people's opinions. Well, enough from me. Family have some memories to share, and Marion has put together a tribute for her dad, and she'd like to share that with us now. Thanks, Marion.
Thank you. That's all right. That's all right. Hello, does that make sense? Dad was one of a kind, a larger-than-life character, as Shanaz described him only a few days ago. Even when he was very ill, his presence was still very strong. It's quite difficult to talk briefly about Dad's life, as he did so much in his 92 years. He would have been 93 next Thursday. He was born in Campsie, Sydney, hence the name Sydney, to Bill and Gladys Balhorn on the 25th of February 1923. He was the eldest of 4 sons. He attended school in Campsie and later won a scholarship to the Hurlston Agricultural High School and travelled by train for about 3 hours a day to attend. It was here he must have honed his skills as an extraordinary gardener and horticulturalist. Later he became a copy boy at the Argus newspaper in Sydney and went on to become a journalist in Australia, Singapore, London, Finland and Nairobi, Kenya, where he married our mother Britta. After some time living in Nairobi, they moved to Dad's beloved South Gippsland, where he'd spent many wonderful childhood holidays with his grandparents Charlie and Alice Smith in Commercial Road, Yarram. Charlie Smith was a bootmaker and he had married Alice Vardy. He and Britta initially lived on Charlie Smith's favourite St Margaret's Island off Mans Beach. They lived off rabbits, wild duck, fish and island-grown veggies and stayed in the hut. A great contrast to life abroad. Later they lived in Devon North, Woodside, Calrossie and eventually Port Albert. Dad earned his living in the country by many means, including market gardening, making boxes at the Yarram Butter Factory, teaching English and science at the Yarram High School and establishing one of Victoria's first free-range egg and poultry farms at Port Albert. Later he set up a local newspaper in Yarram called the Yarram Star. I remember quite a lot about these various stages of our family life. At Yarram High he was my teacher, and he was famous for his shocking handwriting on the blackboard, but his classes were never dull. He would have stargazing sessions at school after dark. We'd throw eggs over the school to see if they landed without breaking. We would have insect and weed collections, watch chickens hatch in the science room, and we would have great poetry sessions. One of his favourites was Edward Lear's The Walrus and the Carpenter. I also remember Dad and his fellow teacher friends, Brian Rogers and Paul Martin, taking weekly English classes for the new migrants in Yarram district. The sessions were mainly taught through singing and were very popular, and I just loved going along and singing and meeting everybody. I have my dad to thank for introducing me to many of the things I treasure in this world. Love and respect for our precious natural environment, the birds, the animals, the wilderness, and fresh air and peace and quiet. He was always passionate about growing your own food and having a wonderful orchard and vegetable garden. His gardens were like mini botanical gardens. At the same time, he had travelled widely and had thrived in many cities throughout the world and thoroughly enjoyed the hustle and bustle there as well. Stephen, Linda, Diana and I also remember many other of Dad's great passions. He loved music, Monte Carlo biscuits with a good cup of tea, Chinese food, anything Spanish, and he loved dancing. He had a fabulous sense of humour, and Dad could always find something amusing or interesting about any situation or person he met. Dad also taught us to stand up for what we believed in. His other great love was boats. Linda, Diana and Stephen had many great trips to Refuge Cove with Dad, Bob Jones and his family. Just a couple of memories of Dad I'd like to share with you. When we were teenagers, my girlfriends, who actually are here today, and I would love nothing better than going flounder spearing with Dad in Corner Inlet. The girls would all sleep over at our house in Port Albert. On dark we would head off wearing sand shoes or gumboots, ready for wading in the shallows, armed with spears and buckets. Dad drove us to the mangrovey shallows of Corner Inlet, where he had a dinghy ready. Until dawn we would spear flounders, throw them in the boat, then drive back home weary but excited about the big flounder cook-up at home, Dad's specialty. Another memory, when Dad was a teacher at Yarram High, I would have to drive to school with him, sometimes in the Austin A40, if I had missed the bus. He was always running late for his classes. We would eventually get in the car, Dad usually wearing a Leary striped black shirt or similar, mismatched tie and very dark glasses. He would have a cup of tea balanced in one hand and he'd be driving with the other. There were always spiders in the corners of the windscreen and their webs. I was a bit frightened, but he said they are fine, they are my pets. Finally we arrived at school and wandered down the corridor to his classroom, which was also my class, about 15 minutes late. You could hear his students a mile off. They were very noisy in the corridor, many of them hiding in the coat lockers. Dad would then shoo everyone into the classroom and the lesson would begin. He was always also famous for sending naughty students either for several laps around the front oval of the school in full view of all the classrooms and the headmaster, or if they were really misbehaving, they would be sent down the street and back. This was a very popular punishment. In 1990, Dad married our wonderful friend and stepmother, Shanaz. They have lived a very peaceful and loving life in Port Franklin in a charming old cottage surrounded by one of South Gippsland's most beautiful home gardens. It's filled with palms, Chinese lanterns, trees and shrubs of all kinds. Orange, lemon, mandarin, persimmon, fig, apple, avocado trees and banana palms and kiwi fruit vines. Not to mention a fabulous veggie garden and several fish ponds. Truly a magic, peaceful garden, which is a joy to walk through or sit in. Whenever we visited Dad and Shanaz, we would leave their home laden with produce. Thankfully, Dad has passed on his green thumb to Shanaz. Thanks for all you have taught us, Dad, and all the good times we shared. In your memory, I will persevere with growing my veggies and fruit, tend my native garden and continue to fill up the bird baths for the weebills and their feathered friends. This is a perfect final resting place for you, Dad, close to your father Bill as you requested, amongst the casuarinas and the beautiful birds by the Albert River. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marion. That was wonderful. Taking many of you back decades. And listening to his description as a teacher, I think the Education Department today needs more SIDS to even out the political correctness of our era. Steve has a tribute that he would like to share with us as well. Thanks, Steve.
Well, thanks for coming. I'll just read it because it'll be easy for me to read. My father had a great affinity with nature from the start. Some of this is repeating what Marin said. He won a scholarship to Hurlston Agricultural High School on the outskirts of Sydney and travelled a long distance by train to school each day. He loved trains. When our country was gripped by depression and their parents were very short of money, Brian, his wild young brother, and Dad were looked after by their grandfather Charlie Smith, the bootmaker, and their grandmother Alice in Yarram. My eldest daughter is named after Dad's grandmother, Alice Smith. Dad fished and hunted with grandfather and often stayed in the house he had built on St Margaret's Island. This explains my father's strong connection with the Gippsland area. Dad later started a cadetship with the Argus newspaper in Melbourne. He heard that there was a shortage of journalists in Singapore and was able to finish his cadetship early if he went there to work. He preferred this option to the menial tasks at the Argus in Melbourne. The radical Sid emerges at an early age. After leaving Singapore, he travelled the world on cargo ships. He loved ships and the sea. Due to his trips on boats around St Margaret's Island, he met my mother on a ship travelling from Finland to England. They'd started corresponding while he worked as a journalist in London, and Mum was living on a farm in the English countryside. She often tells the story of Dad returning her love letters with her English corrected. English was not her first language and she was grateful for the help. They married in Nairobi, Kenya in 1950. Dad and Mum left Kenya because his grandmother Alice, who he loved very much, had been run over by a vehicle in getting on a tram in Melbourne. She was not expected to live, but in fact she lived for 30 years. But the return to Australia was lucky because the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya started, and it was not a good place to be if you were a whitey. The blacks had had enough of the whites taking over their country. They lived off the land at St Margaret's Island for 9 months until their money ran out. Dad taught me to shoot on St Margaret's Island. He said, keep shooting at that mangrove stick till you hit it, son. Dad had various farming jobs, established a market garden at Kawarossi, that's where I was born, made butter boxes at the milk factory in Yarram, and tried his hand at teaching. The headmaster at Yarram High, Mr Hurley, said, Sid, you've knocked around a bit. How about trying your hand at teaching? It was a time before you needed qualifications in teaching to be a teacher, and they were desperate for teachers. Many of Dad's pupils became high achievers. He used to head off from Port Albert to teach in Yarram in his Austin 840, always late with a cup of tea in the hand. That's what Marin said. This one's Dad's love of crayfish. Dad would say to me, on their way home from Sunday schools, see if Harold Smith's boat, the Ronaldo, is tied up at the wharf. Dad used to swap a chicken for a cray. Now you would need about 20 chickens for a swap. Dad said I wouldn't like to taste because he didn't want me to acquire an appetite for crayfish. He said the same about oysters. Dad met Shanaz in 1990 and established a beautiful garden at Port Franklin. Ernie Perry and his late wife Daphne, also residents of Port Albert, helped Dad and Shanaz both with kindness and practical things. Dad was a good wordsmith but lacked some practical skills. Shanaz, with her Eastern philosophies, helps soothe the anger in Dad, who was so passionate about wanting to fight the injustice of the world. Shanaz helped Dad to try and accept the world and not to tackle things that he could do little about. The beautiful garden they established together in Port Franklin would be second to none in the area. Earlier in his life, any rented house Mum and Dad lived in was usually left with a wonderful garden. Dad's love of nature can be seen in the legacies that he has left behind. Shanaz enabled Dad to live his final days in familiar surroundings in the home and garden he loved in Port Franklin. He wasn't keen to be cared anywhere else. She was determined that he would end his days at Port Franklin. She showed true compassion and love and wonderful goodness.
She showed true compassion and love and wonderful goodness from within, and I'm most grateful for her care.
Thank you so much, Steve. Lynette has some words to share with us. We hope that your magic can just keep the rain away, Lynette. Give us a bit of West Australia.
So, better bring that down, seeing as I'm so short. Look, I've just got some memories of Sid over 42 years. He's been my friend for 42 years, and as part of it, I'm also going to convey a message from Shanaz. Over the 42 years, there was no longer than 18 months went by when we didn't see each other. And Sid came to WA 6 times, me about 25 times, as well as lots of snail mail in Sid's illegible handwriting that Marian's already mentioned. I knew Sid as Sydney Gordon because many years ago Sid and I joined a society called Unknown Poets, and we were trying to get our poems published, and his were much better than mine. So Sydney Gordon was his nom de plume as well when he joined the Unknown Poets. I remember us going to the now defunct Australia Party meetings, and then Sid eventually stood as an independent candidate in the federal seat of Isaacs in 1980. I remember him introducing me to famous philosophers such as Nietzsche. He encouraged me to go to uni, and then with both of us ended up studying semiotics and structuralism. He would send his essays over sometimes, and I would tell him his paragraphs were too short, which really annoyed him. 26 years ago, Sid hit the jackpot and met Shanaz, and we've had some great holidays together, to Kalbarri in Western Australia, where he met Prince Leonard and followed him round like a loyal subject. Our trip to Sydney in the Blue Mountains, where he nearly got left behind, as he does. His joy of seeing Little Ebony and the Tasmanian Devil in Tasmania, and our trips to Canberra, where Sid introduced me to the coastal road to Sydney. Sid brought me to this Alberton Cemetery a few times to show me where he wanted to be buried, and I must say he has a fabulous view. Lastly, I'd like to pay tribute to Shanaz, who has always looked after Sid like a baby, but recently she has outdone herself. Sid was able to stay at home almost to the end, only due to her valiant efforts. It was a privilege to be able to spend time in Port Franklin with both of them recently, and Sid and I had a couple of good laughs and some great reminiscing. Now I'm just going to read a few words from Shanaz. This is a piece from Robert Frost's poem. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. That's from Shanaz. She says, "It changed my life completely in the most extraordinary way, taking the road less travelled by, and what a journey it has been. But again, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. I've lost my mentor, my garden guru, and my literary critic, with an inquiring mind and a fearless spirit. But he will live on posthumously, I think, and will be greatly missed." At that point, Shanaz would like to express her special thanks to Ernie Perry, who's been an absolute tower of strength. So you see, Sydney Gordon, that's my name for him, you've had a wonderful life and left behind a lovely family and devoted wife. And thanks especially for sharing some of your life with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynette. And while you've been speaking, and the others have been speaking as well, our attention from time to time is drawn to Sid's coffin. I can assure you that every leaf, every flower, every piece of fruit, in fact everything that you see displayed there comes from his garden. Few people at their farewell can boast of something as grand as that.
No.
How authentic and how natural. We're going to pause for a moment as we listen to just a piece of music. I'm sure this is one that would receive Sid's tick of approval. And if there is anyone that has a special burden and would like to add a memory or two, we just suggest that you keep it brief, but at the close of our music you'll have a few moments to be able to share that with us. Good, thank you.
I'm Ivan Smith. I claim to be Sid's 23rd cousin, but the relationship's genuine, but sorting out the problem. I knew Sid as a kid. We used to come down and stay with Uncle Charlie, his grandfather, great-grandfather. And I remember going out to Man's Beach there just as a wee tot. But later on, I met Sid again when I was in the Department of Agriculture and had his poultry farm. And I used to come down to the farm to advise him, and also I had to sort of sort out some of his abuse at the department. I remember he was very much against the egg board. And he was always writing to the minister about the egg board. and naturally he didn't get very far. And he had a file this thick. Now, you're in a public service, a file that thick, you're doing good. But one particular time, he didn't get a reply, so he sent a letter in, and I don't know if you remember, you don't see it now, but there used to be brown paper, it was almost cardboard. And he typed out his letter on this, and he addressed it to the minister, and there was the curse of the whole department. You couldn't put it anywhere because you couldn't fold it up and open up, and it was too big. Nobody knew what it was. That obvious, you couldn't hide it. It was a typical thing, like in the department, you didn't like the answer, you lost the letter. But this was too big because everyone would know what happened to it. I don't know what answer he got, but he never won his case in that one. And then his other famous case, it's worth knowing, that when he stood for council, was on the council, something in Yarram, and anyway, the Truth newspaper wrote up about him, and they gave him the whole front page. I mean, that's a curse to anybody, really, except for Sid. He took their whole front page and put it in the front page of his newspaper, and he corrected it. About every word was spelt wrong, it was out of context, the English was wrong. Anyway, it kept going on and on and on, and eventually he gave him 2 for endeavour on him. But Sid was a character you meet very, very few in this life. He's only a few years older than me, but as I say, I've known him most of my life. My family knew him much longer. I was due sometime last year to present him with a copy of our family history. He was very interested in that, but he wanted me to do all the work. Anyway, after spending a bit of money, I got a stack about 5 or 6 inches thick of our family history, which naturally is part of the Smith family, and he was really pleased that I found out that we're not really English, we're Irish. Our great-great-great-grandfather in 1641 come from Manchester, and he was a bootmaker, and right through the family we can trace bootmakers. His grandfather was a bootmaker here in Yarram, and his father has a better history than even Sid has been antagonist with a grandfather. We found that out. And go back a bit further, we found out we were mixed up in the Eureka Stockade. So Sid's got a lot of history with him, and we'll all remember him, and there's a lot of good things to think about him. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to add something? Thank you, sir.
Sitting at the backyard was his birthday, and Marion gave him a copy of Melway's, and he said, "Oh, thanks very much, Alice, but you should have got the hard copy." The hard cover, sorry. Another time I sent him a postcard from Sydney or somewhere, and all I did was write sort of a legible scrawl and signed it Jimmy, and he said to Marion, "It was very nice of him to send me that card, but God, he's got shocking handwriting." All right, good to know you, Sid. Very, very happy to have you as a father-in-law. Well done.
Ray Hodges, Sid's cousin. Just a couple of little things. I spent a lot of time with Sid down at the old hut. We had a ball. The rickety old jetty, 1-plank jetty down there, made mostly out of driftwood from the 90 Mile Beach and tea tree. And we spent ages down at the old hut. Had marvellous times with our grandparents, with the C.T. Smith, Charlie Smith. It wasn't on St Margaret's Island, it was just off St Margaret's Island, but it was very close to St Margaret's Island, and that was great. Sid, when he was younger, stayed with us in Caulfield. He came over from Sydney He stayed with us, this is something that didn't get a mention, in Caulfield for, I don't know, about 3 years from memory. He went to Cerberus, he was in the Navy down there, and he went to Cerberus. And he used to come home to us at weekend, and he'd go to the Caulfield Town Hall, and he loved Latin American music and Latin American dancing and every other sort of dancing. And he'd win the dancing comps down there. And cigarettes were rationed, and he'd come home with a card on a cigarette nearly every Saturday night as a prize from his dancing down there. And my sister used to go with him in later times and dance down there sometimes too. He loved his dancing right through, didn't he? And his love of Latin American music in particular. I hear lots and lots of tunes on the radio now, immediately think of Sid. And even a couple of silly little ones. Chicka Chicka Boom Chicka, I remember, was one. South of the Border, definite favourite. La Golondrina, all of those absolute favourites. Anyway, we had beaut times with Sid. He had his bike down there, he polished up, he rode it down to Yarram from Caulfield there at one stage. A little old bike that he had, and it was a semi-racer, and it was, oh, lovely. He gave it to me when he left there, didn't he? And I still had it, and my son, I did it up for my son. It only went out of the family very recently. He had canaries and budgerigars that he bred down there, and some of the budgerigars were a bit inbred. And he called him their little freakies. He called him his little freakies. He had these things running up his arm and on his shoulder. He had quite a lot of budgerigars. He looked after the budgies and what have you. Anyway, that's just a couple of little asides, and I just thought I'd add those couple of little bits for you. And we had lovely times with Sid, and we remember him very fondly.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was wonderful. So you've heard it from a number of sources. Sid loved birds. He also drove cabs.
That's right.
Yes, that's right.
And it wasn't uncommon for him to, when he was living down in Melbourne, to go down to the yacht club and just ask, is there anyone that wants a crew? And so that's the way that he would get rides and took him to wonderful places. You don't get anywhere if you don't have a bit of front. And he certainly did. Now, this is a poem that he enjoyed. Family have asked me to share it with you. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. Begin and cease, and then again begin, with tumultuous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long drawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love nor light, nor certitude nor peace nor help for pain. And we are here, as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Like all good things, they come to a close. Have a beginning and they have an ending. Good lives and as well ceremonies that celebrate those lives. In the next few moments, we're going to suggest that you come forward after the family have done so and place something that was living on to the world of literature. I speak of Rudyard Kipling, and in his poem called If, just one stanza: if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you yet none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, then yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Wonderful words indeed, and words that certainly ring true in the life and times of Sid Balhorn. There's a life force which in some individuals sadly is not acknowledged. Some ride on its back as though it were a beast of burden. Some pay small tribute to it and just drift through life without goal or direction. But thankfully there are some rare individuals who are able to harness its drive, make its presence felt in everything they do, and share its power, its dynamic with all they meet. Each one of you here today, and many, many more besides, the world around, have been privileged to touch the life of at least one person who measures that description, and specifically Sid Balhorn. We've heard that Sid served his nation well through times of war and peace. And Saul is going to use his cornet and give us the last post and reveille in honour of this man's commitment to his nation during time of war. As a mark of respect, would those who are seated please stand? Thank you, Saul.